You ready for this? All right. The statements issued by hosts, co-hosts, guests, and anyone else appearing on the show do not reflect the stance of the College of New Jersey or the NJDOE OSE. Please use your professional judgment when implementing strategies and resources within your practice. Hey listeners, this is Brian from the future. You're tuned into the final part of our fascinating conversation with Melissa Millick. In this segment, we'll move from the professional landscape to a deep dive into the technology itself. Plus, we'll talk about some exciting new tech innovations that are changing the game and wrap up with our final thoughts on the always fun game show. You won't want to miss how Melissa's perspective on inclusion is shaping the future of assistive technology.
We kind of touched on like a team-based approach before, but something we didn't talk about is family and caregiver education. And I know from, being an SLP, someone who is specialized in AAC, that carryover at home is so important. And, we want to lessen the risk of abandoning AT tools. How do you approach this family and caregiver education piece about like maybe a piece of tech or even a support strategy that you're using with a student? What's your approach to
Yeah.
training family and caregivers, like especially if maybe their child is blind or has low vision and they do not, they're sighted.
Yeah. So here, like professionally thinking about the AT that this kind of goes into the other thing where it's like I think a lot of Vision AT here is like supporting making sure the devices are accessible, making sure that like there's textures. It's unfortunately, I think maybe I can talk about this a little later, but I think vision tech is sometimes inherently inaccessible to people with motor and cognitive difficulties because of how you compensate for vision loss. I'll get into that. But so here, a lot of the times, I think we double team and work with like our other team members, like our SLPs or our OTs. Um, Also, we have accesses to the New York State Commission for the Blind. I believe New Jersey should also have an equivalent. Sometimes they're called different things, but it's essentially an office, a branch of like a department in the government that supports students. And
Yeah.
so,
In New Jersey, it's the New Jersey Commission for the Blind.
oh, okay, perfect. Somewhere it was called State Services for the Blind, like in Minnesota, because I used to live there for a little bit. So anyway, so they give a at least New York does, again, a budget of about $500 for students to use for tech. And sometimes we're able to like get a little bit sort of like buy-in because like you get free stuff and it's relatively easy to get. Signing up for the commission is a pain, but if you can get that step done, then we have kind of ironed out our system where we sort of like manage it for the families. Of course, they have to sign off on a lot of things, but because they know us and like we do a lot, we can order the things and then that belongs to the student. It's not in the school. But we obviously use it here for therapy and stuff. And so I think sometimes with that, it's like, oh, well, if they get it, they also can have someone come into the home to help support. And usually I found that the vocational rehab therapists that can or O&M specialists that can come into the home who are working or contracted with the commission, they generally are a little bit more aware of vision tech than they are about like I worked with someone recently who came in for one of our students and like he had no idea what a power link was. He did not know what accessible games were. Like we had to give him all the cheat sheets, walk him through all the stuff. But like, oh, like a beeping thermometer, yeah, sure, like he'll do that. Or like, a talking book player, he can do that. So we are kind of lucky in the way that we have a little bit of that extra support from the commission, but otherwise it's a lot of working with our team and just um honing that in. And of course, anytime that the parents can come in, we love that as well.
Yes, we love a parent caregiver training.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Kind of going to something a little bit different, talking about maybe not as closely related to what you tech that you might work with every day, but it could be. Um,
Mhm.
So we're always on the lookout for what's new and exciting. What's an
Oh,
innovation that you've seen recently in the world of blind and low vision tech that really excites you, you think has the potential to be a game changer?
ooh. Well, one of my friends went to the NFB convention recently, so good timing on this one. Um, and two things that were seen, there were like shoes that would like vibrate and tell you where, so it's kind of like a cane replacement.
Oh, wow.
I'm still a little nervous about a cane replacement personally, to be honest. I think sometimes it doesn't need to be high tech, and we talked about that before. Like a cane does what it like extends your
Mhm.
hand so you can touch the ground, knows where things are. Are there things above that you can't sometimes tell? Sure. Okay, yeah, there's what we call upper body protective technique. You pick up your palm facing outward, I believe. Nope, inward. Inward. O&M, don't come for me. Um, um, to like protect if you can maybe detect that something's there, but it is true, like that is a little bit of a concern. But the shoes are supposed to like vibrate and tell you where the obstacles are. There have also been like other like cane things that also do similar things. The ones that I've heard that I feel like I've seen have been a little janky. So like I like my cane. Not giving that up, but the shoes seem kind of cool. I'm excited where that would go. Also something else is like Braille tech is very expensive, as I'm sure a lot of other tech also is. There was like a small Braille embosser. Like so many people in their
Ooh.
homes have like printers, right? Like you just, oh, like I need
Mhm.
this recipe, let me go print a copy. For Braille, like you're looking at, 4 digits, and not like the little 4 digits either, right? So there was one that was like I think also 4 digits, but like low four, I think it was like 13 to 1500.
Wow. That's really
Uh
cheap.
Wow.
yes, for like yeah, and it's kind of sad because like why does everything have to be so expensive when you're because then think about it, like your access to literacy, information, like all these things depend on so much money. Like again, luckily we have systems like the commission that will help with some of that, but like it's still like you have to register, you have to have like the wherewithal to deal with like bureaucratic policies and forms and
Mhm.
like it's hard sometimes, but there are cool things, and I think so those are some of the things. And also I've seen my friends with those meta glasses that I've mentioned. Those are it's also I love also universal design and tech that's like good for everybody.
Yes.
Like sometimes here in the city they have these like little buttons that'll tell you when the bus is coming, and they just have an unassuming little beep. Boom. Like it's not bothering anybody, but if you need it, you can find out when the bus is coming. And like anybody can use it. Like why not? Um so, like, the AI glasses, like, not everybody, but, like, I feel like people know of them that are not in the AT space, but they're so helpful for people who are visually impaired or just need AT in general, so,
And that's why those,
yeah,
accessibility features that are built into your phone are so awesome
absolutely.
and powerful because it's everybody has a smartphone, right?
Mhm.
And I was just having a conversation with somebody and talking about how, I know some schools are eager to take phones away from children when they're in class, but thinking
Mm,
about what that a student might be using to help them in the classroom with those accessibility features, not just
and
kind of going on a
sometimes
game or
yeah,
something like that.
totally, and for a lot of, visually impaired, I'm sure other kids with other needs also, like, it's about not sticking out. So, even if they get a accommodation to keep the phone, they might stick out now because no one else has them. And for some kids, that's really uncomfortable. So, like, you can have really fancy magnifiers that are really big and like you don't have to strain your neck, but then you have kids who are like, no, I I don't want to use that because it makes me stick out, makes me uncomfortable. Kids ask questions. I think it would be great if our kids had all the empowerment to be like, no, this is me, this is what I need, and I love me, and I love this, and I love the fact that I can access this. But unfortunately, like, teenage growing up is hard and it's not always that easy. So I think, yeah, like again, playing level playing field. So
That's cool. I want to go back to that inexpensive Braille embosser. I know it's not inexpensive, because I've looked at them. They're usually in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, and you
yeah.
can find some for cheaper or secondhand. Um, I want to find out more about that. Do you know the name?
Yeah,
Do you remember
I
the
do
name of
not
it?
at the moment, but maybe I can send you a link and we could put it in like the show notes or
Yeah,
something.
definitely.
Sounds good.
So I will send that definitely. But yeah, those
Awesome.
are some of the cool gadgets I've seen, and also accessibility and like even stuff like like even like ATMs or like NFB the other year that I went there's a Korean company that was advertising like like ATMs, but like for tickets for buying. Like I know here in New York City, you can plug into most ATMs or
Mhm.
like Metro card machines to use like audio feedback. I don't know what the switch accommodations for that would be. That's that's something I don't know about, but the vision stuff I know is there, and like but not all, like you go into McDonald's, they don't have that. You go into like the movie theater, they don't have that. It's only like these very big places. And I feel like if some of that like mainstream, like your laundry machine, like all these
Yeah.
places don't have. So like, yeah, having
Yeah.
built-in
Update the
accessibility.
infrastructure in
Mhm.
Yeah,
general to,
totally.
to be like designed for everybody, like you said. Awesome. Okay, we're gonna go into our quiz game show kind of portion of the episode, if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay. So this game, I'm going to run the game this time a little bit different, and
Mhm.
Melissa and Brian are going to play the game. So this game is called Blind or Visually Impaired Fact or Fiction.
All
Okay,
right.
couldn't be simpler. I'm going to make a statement about assistive technology for students with visual impairments and multiple disabilities. Our contestants, Brian and Melissa, just have to tell me if it's fact or fiction. And a
All
bonus
right.
point if you can explain why in one sentence. No buzzers, just shout it out.
All
All
right.
right. Are you both ready?
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay. Our first one, fact or fiction. A refreshable braille display is a tool used exclusively for reading digital books.
Who goes first, or
Whoever
how do we
Shout
wants.
it
shout
out.
it out?
All right, I'm
Okay.
gonna go. I'm going fiction.
Fiction.
It's
Fiction.
because you can use Braille displays for pretty much anything, and they now can connect to computers, iPads, iPhones, Android devices.
Apple
Um,
TVs for reading
yes,
subtitles.
yep, they can
Yes.
connect to everything. They're so cool. They're unfortunately, like you were talking about, Braille embossers. They also can be very expensive as well.
Yeah.
But for someone who knows Braille and uses them, you can use them pretty much anywhere, and I love them. They're cool.
And this is why we should still
Awesome.
be teaching Braille. Little plug for loving some Braille. Anybody who's listening and wondering, should I be focusing on auditory or Braille? Braille is very
Both.
important.
Both. Yes, I
Yes.
agree. Braille.
Yes.
We need I agree. I have a lot of students who use Braille, and um yeah, I want them to use it in the classroom too, not just on
Yes.
the Braille display, or it's got to be everywhere. But
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Next one, fact or fiction. For a student with cortical visual impairment, or CVI, making an image bigger is always the best way to improve their visual access.
Fiction.
Mhm.
Correct. Why?
So maybe I can take this one. So, um, cortical visual impairment, or some say cerebral visual impairment, CVI, is a brain-based visual impairment, which means that I like to compare it like your camera is really good, but you don't have the face recognition technology. And
That's a good point.
so, yeah, I love to say that because I feel it, like we highlight picture or like subjects or like erase subjects from photos because your AI can be like, that's a person. I'm gonna get rid of that, and fill in like with the rest, right? Like our brains fill in so much of our information, and so in that case, it's not necessarily about making things bigger because it's not that your eye doesn't have the resolution or like that you need to make it bigger so you can perceive it. It's that your brain needs to learn what it's looking at. And so you want to generally you want to be taking away or like highlighting things to make it easier for the brain to understand what it's seeing, rather than uh, like making it exclusively bigger because you're accommodating for for the brain more so than you are for the eye.
Awesome.
So
Okay. Next one, fact or fiction? Screen readers and text to speech software do the exact same job.
Fiction. Um,
yep.
so screen readers, they control the computer. So text to speech is more like I need an audio output. I'm selecting text and I'm having being spoken back to me. Whereas with a screen reader, you're not only able to select text, you can also copy text, paste text. You're navigating the computer or the iPad or the iPhone. You're opening things, you're closing things, you're text messaging, you're emailing. Really, pretty much text to speech is only one does only one thing, and that gives you auditory feedback or auditory of something you selected and you want to hear.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I would say the same thing.
Okay. Next one, fact or fiction? Using a tangible object, like a small spoon, to represent lunchtime can be considered a form of assistive technology.
I say this is fact.
Fact.
Saying
Correct.
yeah, well, we touched on this before too with light tech. Tangibles are definitely light tech. They're a tool that help you build those concrete concepts before you move on to pairing them with other things and building uh oh my gosh, there's a word that I want. Symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. And our last one, fact or fiction? Once a student has a dedicated speech generating device or AAC device, they no longer need separate AT for their visual impairment.
Fiction.
Fiction.
Yes, correct. Why?
Just because their communication needs are being met doesn't mean they're separate. I'm sorry. Communication needs and their visual access needs are two separate things. So, yeah, we might have to combine them, like we were talking about before. Melissa was talking about before.
Making
But
your AAC device accessible
right,
for their visual needs, but
right.
yes.
They are two different things. So, one is to access, and the other is more for communication.
All right. Fantastic job, Brian and Melissa. You've shown us how important it is to look past the common myths and understand the facts when it comes to supporting our students. And we're going to wrap up with some final thoughts now. Thank you again, Melissa, for sharing your expertise with us and our listeners. This has been so incredibly valuable. I think we talked about before. We're going to just ask one more question. Looking at the bigger picture, what is one common misconception about assistive technology for the blind and visually impaired population that you'd like to clear up for our listeners? I know we talked about maybe more in terms of the population that you work with, but if you could think about like as a whole, thinking maybe more, you were talking about like high tech options that maybe, don't fit the needs of your students. Yeah. What's a
Yeah.
common misconception?
So, maybe less of a misconception and more of like things things to think about would be like what it does for you. Like we also mentioned a little bit with that is like Vision AT generally has the purpose of bringing you information, um, where like the other AT that we've covered, like is mostly giving you access to movement, whether it's your own through a power chair or like manipulating other objects, or like of course communicating is like the big things I'm thinking of here. Um, and sometimes I think something else that's important to know is that because when you don't have vision, you have to rely on other things and other
Mhm.
ways. And so what happens then is that vision tech ends up being unintuitive to use for people who don't understand it. Like for people who use screen readers, saying to like click the link at the top right doesn't make any sense. You'd have to say it's under heading level 2 And, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's a link that starts with the letter H, and then they could use their fancy commands to like jump around and
Giving
like
that really
find.
specific information.
Yeah. Because they don't imagine the screen as a square rectangle with things aligned in a row. There's certain devices that don't even have screens. They're like Braille note takers.
Hmm.
Some have screens, some don't. Like you just and some have Braille. They used to have like Braille. What is it called? Like Braille and Speak, Braille lights.
The Braille No
They
Touch.
well, no, those are new. I'm talking about older devices that had no display,
Oh,
that it
yes,
was
yes.
just auditory based. And so for those, you have to like you have like a basically your picker and your chooser commands, but it's up to you to to cognitively understand, to conceptualize what the structure of those like folders and subfolders are. It's also a lot on understanding the key commands, a lot of like Braille in general, but also like navigation on devices is keyboard shortcut based or gesture based. Like there's so many different gestures. Like when anybody uses my phone who doesn't use voiceover, they're like, why can't I do anything? It's like because the phone now follows different rules. And so it's it's hard to use for people who are not sighted because it sometimes operates on completely different structural principles. It generally looks the same to you, like the screen might look the same, but the way in which a blind person might be thinking about the content of the page, it's completely different. And if the app is coded correctly, they'll account for that. And then also the other thing that I wanted to say about that is like, well, I guess to add to that is like, that's why I think vision tech is actually, it's maybe a little hard to play with all the other stuff, is like everything else is trying to take away cognitive demands, like let's make everything pictures, and let's make everything direct touch, and let's like push a switch so that you can reach that thing over there. I feel like it's almost the opposite in some way, whereas like you're using your keyboard commands, you're using maybe like even O&M, right? Like you're using I can draw the shape of the hallways in this building and all the doors out of my memory,
Hmm.
because like you have to use so much of your like mind mapping, spatial reasoning, spatial awareness for even your computer, all this kind of stuff. I think those are like the biggest things I would say, is that the approach is so different for these two kinds of tech, and sometimes it's really hard to accommodate, because then you're like, "Ugh, I just want to use eye gaze for this kid because they have no other ways," and then I'm like, but they can't see, and that's really fatiguing. So it's really hard. They're almost like a little bit of a contrast to each other, and that might be why, like what I was saying before, they don't play as much. So maybe not so much a misconception, but like encouraging you to think about like, how is your kid or your client or people we're working with understanding the screen that you're looking? How are they perceiving it? Only through sound, and how can that look different in their heads? Um, and how can that inform the choices that they make and the mistakes that they make and all that stuff? So just wanted to put that out there.
Cool. I have
Thank
I have
you.
a I have a question. So just to wrap up, if
Sure.
for anyone, is there a way to connect with you? Do you share any of your art online, or is there a way
I'm
to get?
very bad at that.
No.
I have like disappeared off of the social networks and things. Unfortunately, everything's so like picture based now. I
Yes.
used to like Facebook and Twitter when they were like sharing statuses, and now everything is like about gifts and memes. And obviously, there's apps to like AI that for me, but I don't want to screenshot everything and ask AI what's in this picture, what's in
Right.
this picture. So, and of course, there are blind visually impaired people who use TikTok and Instagram and
Hmm.
all of the things. So, not speaking for everybody, but for me, I find it to be a little bit more tedious. So
I
I
think
am not.
it's even overstimulating from, someone who
Yeah.
is sighted and uses their vision. So I don't blame you. And
Yes.
we have the value of your conversation here. Thank you for providing that for us.
Good. All right, Melissa, thank you for that great conversation. And to our amazing listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of TCNJ AT Talks. And that's a wrap on another episode of AT Talks. A huge thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. We love making this podcast and building this community with all of you. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. The team at the Assistive Technology Center at TCNJ is dedicated to supporting educators across New Jersey. If you are inspired by today's discussion and want to bring high-quality, free professional development to your district, Vanessa and Madison are ready to help. To learn how you can partner with the center and build capacity in your school, head over to our website. You can find all the information you need at atcenter.tcnj.edu. And while you're there, we want to hear from you. Visit the podcast tab. There you can send us a question through our Google form, or even better, leave us a voice message on SpeakPipe for us to play live on the show. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay up to date on all our latest events and resources. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube with the handle @ATCenterTCNJ. And don't forget to subscribe to AT Talks on whatever platform you're listening on right now so you never miss an episode. On behalf of Vanessa, Madison, and myself, Brian, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.